Hello, it's Debbie Gilbert here from the Business Awards show, and I'm also the founder of the Best Business Women Awards. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Sophie Maughan, who is an intellectual property lawyer for Cleveland Scott York. She's been an intellectual property lawyer now for over 20 years, so she has lots of experience about intellectual property. So we're going to be touching on that today and talking a bit about the importance of protecting your intellectual property. They sponsor the Best Business Women Awards. So we're going to talk a bit about why Cleveland Scott York sponsor the Best Business Women Awards, and also about what role awards have played in their part of the development of Cleveland Scott York as well. And we're going to find out a bit more about Sophie and all about why she's became an intellectual property lawyer. So welcome, Sophie.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great to chat to you. So, yeah, let's start off by going back to the beginning. So, what made you go into intellectual property law?
Yeah, so I was at university and I was studying chemistry, and I was getting to the realization that I didn't want to be stuck in a lab. And I think this is the same story for a lot of people that get into intellectual property, actually. You realize that lab work isn't for you. It's quite repetitive, and you probably have to fall into the right niche of an amazing strand of your science, that you can see some amazing discoveries coming on the horizon, but I just wasn't seeing that for me. And I didn't know anything about intellectual property law, or that there were any careers in it, until I went to a careers fair about halfway through university, and there was a small firm there, and chatted away, found out about it, and I thought, this is definitely for me. It means I can continue using my scientific brain, but I won't be in a lab, but I can continue working with interesting people that are coming up with interesting ideas. And so I then did a little bit of work experience in the summer break, before my final year, and thought, yeah, this is still for me. It didn't put me off.
Mm.
I was then able to see there's a lot of sitting and reading and thinking. It's a very intellectual job, but it that thought that suits me. So after leaving university, I was lucky to get a role to train, and went straight into it, and it took about 5 years to train up to become a patent attorney first of all, and then I carried on and did some more qualifications to become a registered trademark attorney.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of misconceptions about intellectual property. So, what are the common things that you see out there with businesses in terms of protecting their intellectual property? What's the myths that is out there?
Yeah, there's quite a few myths, really. Um, and uh, so I think a lot of people at first think it's not important.
Mm.
Um, on the trademark side, a common myth is that if you register your company at Companies House, you're fine. You've done what you need to do, and unfortunately, that's not the case. And I think it's a bit confusing, because when you go to Companies House to register a company, there is a step where they warn you that you can't register a name that's too similar to anybody else's name that's already registered there. So you get to thinking, oh, well, there's this check here that I'm not going to be getting too similar to anybody else. But that check on Companies House is such a fine detail of a you just have to be a few characters away from an existing company name, and you'll be fine in terms of registering at Companies House. But it doesn't mean that you won't infringe their rights. So you get a full sense of security that, oh,
Mm.
Companies House have let me through and registered the company. So a myth is that, yeah, you're fine, you've registered the company, when in fact at that stage, if you're coming up with a new company name, it would be brilliant at that stage to do a bit of searching online, do some trademark searching, just doing some general internet searching to see who else is out there in your same field that could have a similar name. So
Mm.
that's definitely one. A lot of people forget about it, get so excited about a new idea they've had, and you might have a patentable invention in front of you that you've come up with, and then people completely forget you've got to keep it secret until you filed that patent application. So that's another area we see. And another misconception is if you see an interesting product on the market and you think, right, I could take some inspiration from that, not copy it, but I can do something similar and put a product out there. And there's this myth that if you change 7 things about the look of a product, you'll be fine. There can't be any infringement because you've changed seven ways about the way it looks. And that again is just myth. That's not the test, unfortunately. So yeah, there's definitely quite a few myths going around.
One of the ones I hear is, well, I've bought the domain name. I've bought the
Yes.
domain name
Yeah.
from a hosting service and I've set up a website. So I've put my stake in the ground. And that also isn't protection,
Yeah,
is it, from other
that's
people?
correct. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
bit like the company's house as well. It just means that that particular string of characters was free, and unfortunately you can still be treading on somebody else's toes. You could still get a cease and desist letter saying that you can't use that name, or you could still get quite scary paperwork summoning you to court. So again, like with the company's house, or if you're registering a domain name or registering a company at company's house, it is a good idea to do some trademark searching at that point as well.
So what I'm hearing is this is very complex. And what advice would you give to somebody setting up a business or who's maybe been trading for a while and has never walked the path of thinking about looking at their intellectual property and protecting it? What's the first step that they should do?
Um, Somebody just coming into a new business afresh, I think it would be really good if they don't have a lot of budget. There's quite a lot of free advice out there, and so get hold of the free advice. It's there, and our institute that represents us as trademark attorneys, called the Chartered Institute of Trademark Attorneys, runs free advice clinics. So trademark attorneys volunteer to staff those clinics, and people can turn up. The online now, used to be face to face in London, but it's online now, and they can get some really
Basic.
good free
Yeah.
advice.
Mm-hmm.
Other thing to do is a lot of reading. There's so much material
Mm.
online, and the UK Intellectual Property Office website is a great source of material.
Mm.
They've worked really hard to try and make it accessible and easy to understand. So that's at ipo.gov.uk. And there's lots of checklists and toolkits for taking people through stage by stage and what they need to think about it at an early stage in a business. And then once they're armed with a bit of free advice, a bit of reading, they can then decide if they want to try and look after themselves. They might have enough information then to file their own trademark application for the new business name, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can really tackle it yourself if you do a lot of reading, and you're quite confident that you can assimilate the information, or speak to a professional advisor. So speak to an IP firm where there's trademark attorneys and patent attorneys, and then at least be able to find out the cost to get some advice and some assistance, and weigh it up whether you want to go down your route of trying to decide what you want to do on the intellectual property side on your own, or whether you want to get some professional advice, which of course will have value add, but we're conscious that not everybody has the money for that at the early stage.
But I mean, there's two separate areas here. One is sort of like your name and your logo, and then obviously the patent side you touched upon earlier, which is when you create an invention, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if you're planning to take something and manufacturing it and having the cost of manufacturing it, I'm guessing your advice is going to be get that checked before you invest that money.
Yes, yeah. These stages where you're investing a lot of money, which could be simply doing a lot of marketing material, spending a lot of money on marketing and advertising. You might want to spend a small portion of that on the trademarks, and same going into manufacturing, maybe creating some tooling for a new product. If you're going to be spending tens of thousands on that, you may as well spend also a small portion of that on checking out the intellectual property side as well, just to make sure that you're covered. And there are some grants that are available, and going to local business organizations to try and point you in the direction of grants can help. So locally in Hertfordshire, we've got WENTA, which I can't remember what they stand for, but Watford Enterprise, but they've got business advisors that can then point you in the direction of
so
various
wherever you
grant
are in the
sources.
UK is go to your local enterprise agency, because that could be a good starting point. And if you're going to use an intellectual property lawyer, make sure they're registered with the Chartered Institute of Intellectual Property Lawyers.
Yes.
Because then they really do know what they're talking about.
We've got the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys and the Chartered Institute of Trademark Attorneys, and if the firm is with either of those, they're going to be regulated, they're going to be qualified. Yes.
So the key pieces of advice really that you're sharing is do some research online first. Have a look at the Chartered Institute of Trademark Lawyers website. Have a look at the Intellectual Property Office website as well, because there's lots of resources on there. And then potentially take advice from somebody like yourself, Cleveland Scott York, about, if getting things protected. Those are the steps. And even if you've been in business 10 years, 15 years, and you've not done this, you should probably do it, especially, if you're looking to sell your business at some point, because it does strengthen your business if you go to sell it, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Often a buyer will do some due diligence, and they'll be thinking about what am I paying for here? If there are intangible assets within the business, they'll be thinking about what are they worth and what am I getting for that money. And so if they're buying into a brand, and the brand is very important, it will be a bit concerning for a buyer if they can see that the brand isn't protected. Once they've bought it, how are they going to know that they can police that brand? So it's definitely worthwhile for investing in that value of the business.
So the other side of this is that a letter comes through the door telling you you're infringing on somebody else's copyright. So or intellectual property, what do you do if you get one of these letters? What would you recommend?
I would definitely phone up an intellectual property firm. So you can go to those Chartered Institute websites, the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys and Chartered Institute of Trademark Attorneys, find a firm and pick up the phone, and they will usually give a free half hour talking it through. And it's likely that the recommendations are going to be, right, we'll need to do a bit of work here, but they can explain what the costs would be. And often some initial work may not be too expensive, but it is really important to check what the ramifications of the letter might be. Do you have any defenses? Really, what's the best advice? And it'll be different in all situations. So it definitely needs looking into. And those kind of letters, they usually have short deadlines to reply. You might be given 2 weeks to reply. So you don't want to sit on it, because often the intellectual property lawyer will need to get further information from you before. They can't just necessarily give you an answer in the first half an hour. They might need to go away and do a bit of research. And so it's important to take those very seriously and just seek some advice, and take benefit of that free half hour that you can get, and then hopefully you can get some cheap follow on to at least see where you stand.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something really you want to just sit on and ignore, because
Yeah.
potentially down the line you could get further litigation served
Yes.
against you if you ignore it.
Yeah.
So what sort of
Yeah.
stories have you come across in your career? It must be
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah. Yeah. So we often see that side where unfortunately a business hasn't engaged with the intellectual property side of things early on enough. So sometimes we'll see that a business is set up, they didn't do their searching at the initial stage. They've they've become well established, and so we've worked for sadly for a number of local shops and salons where they've picked a name, they've started trading, they've put up their shop signs, they've been trading for a few years, and then they get a cease and desist letter. And we've definitely seen a few cases where the advice has been, right, you do actually have to change your name, unfortunately. And we've seen a few where they've been using their name for a few years and suddenly they've got to change. And it is really complicated at that stage. You've got to negotiate a changeover period. Usually the trademark rights owner wants you to change as quickly as possible, but that takes time. You've got to get new signage made if you've got a bricks and mortar business. You've got to get permission from the local council to change your signage in some cases. You've got to print new marketing material, change your domain name. It can be a really lengthy process. And all those people that know you by word of mouth are then going to have to get to know the new name. So it's not a situation people want to be in. We can try and make it as smooth as possible and help negotiate for longer changeover periods and things like that. But ultimately it's a really hard process. And so that's why doing those searches early on before you spend a lot of money and invest in just all that time building up your business is so crucial. So that's always sad to see when people are having to change their name when they've really become established. It's always nice when you can fight off what appears to be a big bully, though. So sometimes we've had clients who get aggressive letters and saying you can't use this name, and in some cases we're able to work out a settlement where they can continue using, or work out really where they've got strong defences and that no, you're not right, big trademark owner. We've got our rights here, and your monopoly does not extend this far. So that's always nice to be able to
Hmm.
help a client continue doing what they do.
As in other areas of law, for example, children and family, where mediation has become a very big thing, is there a mediation element with intellectual property law?
It's becoming bigger. One of my colleagues has just been doing some mediation training, so that's a side that we'll be able to offer in future. I don't have so many clients at the moment who actually go in for formal mediation where you're both sides have completely signed up to maybe working out a settlement with a mediator in a day in quite a formal environment. But we definitely are used to a bit more of an informal negotiation side. So the vast majority of cases that pass through our desks do get settled amicably without anyone going to court. And so it's a kind of informal mediation that happens over several weeks, usually in writing rather than the parties getting together in a room. But I think it's going to be something we'll have more and more of, formal mediation. Yeah.
Which is great to hear. So if you're listening to this and you haven't protected your intellectual property or patented your product, do consider these steps that Sophie's talking about, because I think it is a valuable exercise to do. And it's like anything in business, there's a cost to it, but actually, ultimately, it might save you a lot of money and make your business worth a little bit more at the end of the day.
Yes. Yes.
So let's go on to talk a bit about Cleveland Scott York and the company's views of awards. They're incredibly supportive of the Best Business Women Awards. They've been a sponsor for 9 years now, which has been amazing working with you guys. And you've always sponsored our customer service category because that's an area you're really passionate about, isn't it? Customer service. Tell us a bit about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it just seems so fundamental to all businesses, customer service. Um, I think, and I think a lot of businesses do it without thinking about it, but um, I think it's interesting for those entrants that go into the category when they've really got to analyze what they're doing to help their
Mm.
customers. And they probably come away thinking, "Oh, actually, we're doing a lot more than we thought about." But it's just so fundamental. We have a lot of repeat clients. I've got clients that I've been working with for 10, 15 years, who've been clients of the firm for even longer than that. And um, they won't come back if we're not there with the customer service. So it's such a fundamental aspect to business that we wanted to support.
And you're one of the judges on the category. So what is it you're looking for when you're looking for exceptional customer service? What sort of things catch your eye?
Um, I know you say this, Debbie, to the entrants, and it's just to reiterate, really, we really want to see specifics. We see some entrants come in and where they're asked to talk about what their say their complaint handling process is, and we just get a brief bit of information saying that they've got a complaints process, and there's just nothing then that we can judge on if we
Mm.
don't get any specific information. So we really like to see some examples and stories and just specific information, and it's all confidential. It's very well organized with your awards. It's it all remains confidential within that application process, so that information isn't going to be shared anywhere else. But it's important to be able to see what specific things an entrant is doing to be able to judge
Yeah,
them and give them a winning mark.
exactly. Because we're not looking for people who are calling customers back within 24 hours because we'd expect people to do that. So we're looking for
Yeah.
people who go, we would say, above and beyond. So
Mm.
it's just like, oh, wow, they're actually going away and doing these additional things that you wouldn't necessarily expect someone to do as the norm.
Yeah.
And like you said, exceptional customer service means that either your client's going to come back to you or they're going to recommend you on to other people. And
Yeah.
that's really what, you want. And you also want to see some online proof, don't you?
Yeah.
Testimonials and
Yeah.
reviews online.
Yeah.
That social proof is so important these days, I think.
Yeah. 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 But yeah, as you say, it's just brilliant for customers coming back to you or recommending you to others, that word of mouth. It all comes back to great customer service.
Fantastic. Now, Cleveland Scott York have won some awards, but also they're part of the Legal 500. So do you want to talk a bit about that? Because that's quite an
Yeah.
interesting accreditation that you can
Yeah.
obtain.
Yeah, yeah. So you were asking me earlier on, do we go in for awards? And at the moment, we're not really going in for any sort of classical business awards, but something we have been focusing on in the last few years is it's very specific to the legal industry, but there are several directories that law firms can enter to be listed in, and they get ranked in, and it's quite similar to an awards process, really, just without a glittering gala night at the end. But we put in submissions to the Legal 500 directory and the Chambers directory and a few others each year, and like an awards application, we have to put in a write-up about us, what we've been doing in the last year. We put in case studies. We have to name referee clients, and those clients get phoned up by the directory. So we pay a bit of money to be entered to cover those costs. They interview the referees, and then the firms who've applied, they get ranked into different tiers. And so one of our aims at the moment is to keep good rankings in those directories. And I think it gives a bit of reassurance to clients that we care about what we're doing, we care about the reputation, we want to show that we're doing good work. And so it's useful when companies are looking for a new advisor. They'll sometimes check the directories and you sort of see, oh, if they're in the directories, they're solid. And I think it's also useful when we're writing, if we happen to need to be writing a cease and desist letter to for a client to another company, if you can see that cease and desist letter is coming from a solid firm that's
Reputable,
been around
yeah.
there, yeah, reputable, know what they're talking about, it holds a bit more weight. So we think those directories are important and worth investing the time. So it takes quite a bit of time to pull together case studies, but I think it's worth it.
And they actually call people up, don't they, and
Yes,
check
yeah,
those testimonials
yeah,
and case
yeah,
studies,
yeah.
which I think validates it even more.
Yeah, it's a
Mm,
mixture of I think email surveys and phone calls. So it's actually all verified.
very good. So what areas of the UK or the world do Cleveland, Scott, York cover? Is it everywhere or specific areas?
Yeah, so we are UK and European.
Hmm.
So even after Brexit, we're still doing work in the European Union. We've opened an office in Munich so that we can continue to do the European work that we used to do. And so we act for clients directly at the UK Intellectual Property Office and then with European intellectual property offices. And then when we are working for clients where we need to get intellectual property rights for them in other countries, so if a client wants a US patent or a US trademark, we have to instruct agents in those particular countries. You have to be qualified to act. So we've got a network of trusted partners that we've worked with for years and years, and use those. And we get incoming work as well from abroad. Similarly, an Australian agent might need a UK patent for their client. So we've built up a strong network over time of trusted people to talk to as and when we need it.
So it is worth noting that if you've got a business that is trading in other countries, that you will need advice on those specific countries potentially.
Yeah,
If you're selling something online or your business trades, physically in those countries.
yes.
So the law, just because you've got the UK rights, doesn't necessarily grant you that in other countries.
Yes, that's another myth, that there'll be a worldwide patent or a worldwide trademark that you can get. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Maybe
No.
one day, but at the moment it's very territorial based system. You get your UK rights, and if you need rights elsewhere, that's a further step to take.
Has it become more complicated since we came out of the EU in terms of European trademarks?
Yes, so there's been a bit of a transition period. There was literally a transition period while things were changing over, and I think it's taking a while to filter down into the understanding in other countries, because companies in America and China and Japan, they were so used to just, you could file an EU trademark and it would cover all 28 EU member states. And now it's quite hard to remember that no, UK is no longer part of that. So if you wanted that coverage you had before, you've got to file in the EU and separately file in the UK. So there was a bit of there was a lot of work actually during the transition period, and it settled down a bit now. And it's just a different landscape that we have to navigate slightly. But we really wanted to continue doing EU work like we had before, so we had to set up an office somewhere in the European Union. We've chosen Germany for that, and that's going well.
Good. So that gives businesses who work with you another added benefit, really.
Yeah,
Can we
one-stop
touch
shop.
on the topic of business names that are descriptive? So I
Yeah,
have one of those, the Best Business Women Awards. What's the
yeah,
situation with those?
yeah. So I think a lot of people just don't really think about it, and so sometimes people say, oh, I've chosen the name because it does what it says on the tin, and they forget that that was a slogan for something, a product with a really distinctive name. Ronseal, the product that had that slogan, was actually quite a distinctive name. So they hadn't chosen a trademark that was just very descriptive. It can be harder with descriptive trademarks to protect them and police them, to stop other people using something similar. So in an ideal world, if you could, it's cheaper probably from an intellectual property perspective to choose something quite distinctive and different from everybody else. And as long as that doesn't happen to coincidentally be similar to somebody else, if you've got a really distinctive brand, it's going to be easier to register it and protect it. Because the general rule is, if the mark is descriptive, you won't be able to register it first off. However, over time, even if you're not back at the initial stage, once you have built up a reputation under that potentially descriptive name, after you've been using it for several years and people identify that name with you, in the UK, you will be able to register it once you can show some evidence of that use over time. So it costs a bit more to register because you've got to file evidence, but it can be done. So yeah, a lot of our work is involved in getting those descriptive trademarks
Mm.
through the hurdles of registration. And you will get businesses where it's just customary in that field to have a descriptive name. So magazine titles will usually be descriptive, and awards names will be descriptive. It would be quite unusual to not say what the awards was about in the name. So you've got to follow those conventions in certain industries, and then what we can do is we can work with people. We might register the logo first of all, get a distinctive logo registered, and then come back to it in a few years and register the name once they've built up that distinctiveness over time.
So it's worth me having another go, because I got
Yes.
rejected
Oh yeah.
a few years ago. And interestingly, I've come up against a problem last year where a company in Malta have set up the Best Business Women Awards and also took most of my category descriptions off my website and a lot of the copy of my website and copied it. And so I've got to look at that and how to deal with that, because obviously they're in Malta. So
Yeah.
it's a whole different kind of ball game, isn't it, when you're dealing with these problems that arise abroad?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that definitely is just quite a unique situation, and it's probably one of those ones where it's worth a phone call to an IP advisor and see what the advice might be in that situation. But yeah, I guess it's not uncommon, if rather than copying somebody on your own patch, copy someone else where hope they're not going to notice. But in the online world, it is actually much easier to find these
It
things.
is, and I found it because I have a Google alert set
Oh,
up against my
brilliant. Yeah.
business name. And if you have a Google alert set up for your industry and for your business name, anyone who's doing something similar will flag it on Google Alerts, and that's
Yeah.
how it cropped up.
Yeah.
Because I think they thought they were being really clever, because they didn't set up a website. What they've done is they set it up as a sub awards for another awards that they run. And they set up a sort of sub page on the website, but of course it indexes on Google.
Yeah.
And so of course
Oh,
it sent me
yeah.
an alert, and I thought,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's something I've got to look at.
Yeah.
I literally came across it before Christmas.
Yeah.
So we do have to be vigilant, don't we,
Yeah.
as business
Yeah.
owners
Yeah.
with all this?
you're doing the right things. Thinking about it, Google Alert is a brilliant tool to have, and that in combination, trademark attorneys will offer what's called a trademark watching service, where if you've registered your trademark, it's good to also have a trademark watch in place as well, where the trademark registers get looked at every time they publish a new set of trademark applications. So you can jump on it if a third party files a trademark application that's too similar to yours. You'll get alerted to it, and nipping those problems in the bud really early on can help. It can be a lot cheaper to send a friendly letter early on asking them to not use that name before they've even started. Sometimes these trademark applications can go in before somebody started using a name, and you can alert them, nope, you can't use that. If you do, I will be taking some action, and quite often it will have a nice resolution. So that in combination with a Google alert, because some things you'll only become aware of because they're used online, and it won't necessarily be the trademark register. That in combination with a Google alert is a brilliant thing to keep an eye on your competition. Yeah, and yeah, with the Malta situation, it's definitely something you want to look into further, because you don't know what you want to do in the future. So you want to keep all your options open.
Exactly, because there might be businesses listening to this that are looking at expanding into other markets. So you do have to be aware of A, expanding into other markets, and B, expanding into other countries. There's the two things that go sort of side by side, really. Well, it's been fascinating talking to you today, because it is such a huge topic, and the one that we've skimmed the surface really in our sort of 30-minute conversation about it. But I think for those people who are listening to this, our listeners are business owners. And if you're sitting there thinking, oh dear, I haven't done any of these things that they've been talking about today, you are leaving the door wide open for a problem. And take the advice that Sophie shared today. Look at those resources. We will make sure that the contact details of Cleveland Scott York are shared, and the links that Sophie has mentioned as well, to go and have a look at those and really seriously start to think about protecting all the assets that you've built up, your logo, your name, your brand, what you stand for. You've worked so hard. Don't let someone else come along and snatch it from you, because or get into legal battles, because it's so stressful, for one thing. And this is something that can be prevented. So
a bit of
take that
investment
advice.
and time early on could save tens of £1,000s later on, and time and heartache.
So thank you. We wish Cleveland Scott York continued success with their legal applications for their Legal 500 awards, and we look forward to seeing you at the Best Business Women Awards this year, presenting the customer service category. So thank you, Sophie. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.